Welcome to my next YouTube video commentary. In this video I will outline my thoughts on our current government's gun buyback scheme and its plans to set up a register for firearms. The Christchurch massacre was a terrible event that shocked this country and the world at large. My sympathies go to the victims and their families for their loss, and I hope that all are slowly getting their lives back to some form of normality. I trust their faith will help them through this extreme event. The government has since the massacre taken full advantage of the aftermath in its attempts to regulate and control the use and ownership of firearms in this country. We don't have an NRA here, National Rifle Association, so the government can and will do what it likes. It is running roughshod over all the law-abiding citizens of New Zealand. These semi-automatic guns were legally owned, but the government is demanding that they be handed in for destruction. What does bear thinking about, although I doubt that this is the primary reason behind the legislation, is that if a government wishes to totally control the people, and remember that is the wish of all socialist governments, then you need to disarm the population first. Only the government can own guns. When we look at the gunman, and I won't give him the satisfaction of being named, the police issued him with his license to own firearms with what appears to be little or no vetting of his past or suitability to own weapons. We are supposed to have a system in New Zealand where the owner of the gun is vetted for suitability and not the gun itself, although this is about to be changed and a register of guns is being proposed. I believe that it is not the gun that does the killing, it is the person who pulls the trigger that is principally responsible. If we have, as is the case with the vast majority of owners, responsible people, then there is no real risk from the firearm. Yes, evil people do get hold of guns, and that will continue to happen no matter what restrictions are put in place. Illegal weapons can always be obtained if the desire is strong enough. Now let's get into the government's proposals that have been rushed through Parliament in what can only be described as rushed legislation, and that is nearly always bad legislation. First, an order in council was put into force that banned all military-style, semi-automatic weapons only 6 days after the tragedy. This order in council is not due to expire until the 30th of June 2020, and as such gives plenty of time for proper reflection on any subsequent legislation. On top of this, a Royal Commission of Inquiry was established to look into all the events that took place in Christchurch and the reasons behind them, who was to blame and who or what contributed to the whole thing. However, even though there was this order in council in place, the government rushed through the Arms, Prohibited Firearms, Magazines and Parts Amendment Bill in just 3 weeks, with only 2 days being allowed for public submissions on the bill. Once again, rushed legislation is bad legislation. So why was this done? Well, in my opinion, it was to promote our Prime Minister on the world socialist stage. She was being seen as doing something grand, and that is what counts for her. There are, by some estimates, over 250,000 totally legal semi-automatic guns, until the passing of this bill, in New Zealand. These guns are mainly in rural areas and are used by responsible people for pest control, to euthanize animals on farms, plus of course for sport and hunting in the wild regions of the country. The passing of the bill was followed up by a government buyback of the now illegal firearms. This has resulted in probably less than a quarter of the estimated number of firearms that are covered by this legislation being handed in. So has the risk of a further Christchurch-like massacre being reduced? I don't think so. On top of this, the range of weapons to be included in the ban has also been increased to include pump-action rifles and the like. However, there has been no extension of the amnesty period. I will now look at the next phase of our government's program, the registering of weapons themselves. Weapons registration was the case in New Zealand from the 1920s till the 1980s, when it was abandoned as being too inaccurate and too expensive to maintain. Why would you believe that any new register will be different? If we look at Canada, they had a similar tragedy to Christchurch and went through a similar legislative process that included a firearms register. It was estimated to cost around $2 million in 1995, but was eventually abandoned after costing some $3 billion and still not being effective. Why would a register in New Zealand be any different? By treating the gun community in New Zealand as bad as she has, the Prime Minister has changed a feeling of trust that existed between the authorities and the gun owners to one of total distrust. All this just to enhance her standing on the socialist world stage. The National Party are also partly to blame, as they supported the initial bill. What is required is for the Royal Commission to complete its work and report back. Hopefully then we will have a complete picture of what happened and who or what is responsible, other than the actual gunman, of course. Then the legislation can be thoroughly examined and passed into law to help alleviate the possibility of such an event happening again in this country. Even so, there will always be the possibility of a repeat, as there are evil people in this world. New Zealand is not immune, even though we like to think we are. Well, that is the end of this video. If you would like to comment, both positive and negative, feel free, as it is good to have a two-way conversation. Also, this will give me ideas for future commentary. Please like and share this video with your friends and family, and if you wish to subscribe to find out when I upload new videos, use the appropriate buttons. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.